Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We trust you had a wonderful Memorial Day, taking time to reflect on those who have given everything for this country and their families. Hope you enjoyed our Memorial Day special, the Three Martini Lunch as well. If you haven't heard that yet, please take the time to do that. Jim, as you well know, I was interviewing veterans Sunday and Monday, a number of World War II veterans, including a couple of concentration camp liberators. A total of 3 Medal of Honor recipients from Vietnam, also a veteran from the war in Afghanistan, and Gene Simmons of KISS. And you're wondering, why is Gene Simmons of KISS being interviewed at a veterans event? He is not a veteran. However, his mother, born in Hungary, was a concentration camp prisoner for a while at 3 different camps. And one of the liberators that we had liberated the camp that she was at. So that was a pretty cool moment. Gene and I, as you know, Jim, don't have a ton in common, but it was an interesting conversation and obviously a great time spending time with all those heroes throughout the weekend.
I figured you two would hit it off like peanut butter and jelly. And here's the thing. If you'd like to appear on the Three Martini Lunch podcast, we have very few guests, but I think if Gene Simmons wanted to talk about the importance of saluting American veterans, I'm up for that. Yeah, we could say.
No, very, very interesting conversation. But we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about how the Democrats still can't grudgingly spit out an apology to Robert Hur for slandering him after his report last year, which we now know is absolutely accurate. We'll be taking a look at, again, the horrible choices for New York City mayor on the Democratic side, this time on the issue of treatment of the Jewish population in New York City. And then in a moment, we're going to be talking about the Democrats' efforts to reach out to young men, which is so organic, Jim, so organic. But in the meantime, Jim, just yesterday, I was talking to the kids and asking them, if you were president, I think my wife actually asked this, what would you do? What's one thing you would do? And my younger daughter said, I'd make everything cost 1 cent. And the first thing I did, Jim,
Greg, the Columbus kids want price controls?
I know. That's what I said. So I immediately, this is during dinner, but I got up, went and got a pen and the back of an envelope and drew a supply and demand curve and explained why that was never going to work. And the reason I know that is because I went to Hillsdale College and I have a basic understanding of how economics work. And so you're thinking, well, how do I get that Hillsdale College education if I can't be a student there? Well, not only can you get it, you can get it for free, including their brand new course, Understanding Capitalism.
Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free. And you can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories in the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. And before everyone thinks I make fun of only the Columbus kids, let me point out that my older teenager, early semester, got all A's except AP Government. I'm thinking B+ in that one. How do you miss that one growing up in this house? You haven't listened to your dad ranting and raving? But anyway, that's where Hillsdale College can help you out.
Exactly. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. All right, Jim, on to our good martini, and it's actually kind of a crazy martini, but it's good that the Democrats are this desperate and kind of this pathetic. As we know, the Democrats did not do well in 2024, and whenever you're on the losing side, you point fingers, you try to figure out what went wrong, and as they look at the polling data and other things, they realize they didn't do nearly as well with young men, young adult men, as they expected. They thought that Gen Z was just going to follow along kind of with the millennials and to be pretty lopsided in favor of the Democrats. Didn't work that way with Gen Z men. And so now the Democrats are trying to fix this. New York Times on the story. Here's part of it. For now, Democratic donors and strategists have been gathering in luxury hotels to discuss how to win back working class voters, commissioning new projects that can read like anthropological studies of people from faraway places. The prospectus for one new $20 million effort obtained by the Times aims to reverse the erosion of Democratic support among young men, especially online. It's codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a Strategic Plan. and promises investment to, quote, study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces, unquote. It recommends buying advertisements in video games, among other things. And Jim, there's nothing more organic than gathering in luxury hotels and trying to probably hire a bunch of consultants to figure out the syntax that you need to use in order to attract young male voters. It couldn't possibly be your policies. It's always about the messaging.
So first of all, Greg, you mentioned that you scoffed that this was an organic initiative of the Democrats. But my understanding is, according to DNC bylaws, everything they do has to be organic and purchased at Whole Foods. Secondly, 20 million. You and I would agree to do it for the Democrats for like 10 million, right? That's 5 each of us. So I am announcing on this podcast an offer to the Democratic National Committee or senatorial, any group that wants to do it. I'm calling the formation. I hope you don't mind if I name it after myself, Greg, but we'll do it together. We'll call it the Garrity Research Initiative for Truth. It's the acronym is GRIFT. And what it is for $10 million. Actually, for the low, we might even knock it off $9.99 million. We will teach Democrats how to speak to young men. And even though we're not as young men as we used to be, we have a little better insight than when you decide to meet in luxury hotels to discuss your appeal to the working class. Go to a Motel 6, go to the Holiday Inn, and at least you might interact with some of the working class people you want to appeal to. We're scoffing here, but I also kind of have to say, I don't know who's the individuals who are behind this, Greg, but don't you almost admire them? Like they recognized a need, or at least someone who was very gullible, and they came up with a price that is like insane. We're talking, generational wealth, as they used to say over at the Lincoln Project. And they said, we're going to do that. We can't just, conduct some focus groups and do it for like $100,000. We need $20 million to appeal to this. And so I'm not even mad. I'm kind of impressed. I'm like, wow, particularly if they got the money. And I think there's a lesson for that in all of us. Wealthy Democrats are gullible, and you can get them to pay for almost anything. So I heard this anecdote, and it really is kind of inspiring. Greg, thankfully, almost everybody in America knows somebody who's dealt with addiction. But they'll say, if you've ever known someone who's addicted to crack, have you ever seen them wake up in the morning, realize they don't have any money, and say, gee, I guess I'm not smoking crack today? They figure out a way to get the money to smoke crack. So you out there, do you want to be outworked by a crackhead? No, they are determined. They stick to it. They do not give up on their dreams, which is smoking crack. So you can figure out some way to make some money out the Democratic National Committee and gullible, the Soroses and all that stuff. Let's do this, America. Let's finance our dreams on the naivete of wealthy Democrats.
Doris is still getting fundraising emails from the Kamala Harris Fight Fund that's going to the DNC. So, yeah, if you're donating to their $20 million of that is going to this. Jim, this story...
I hate to interrupt, but if you donate, who fights Kamala Harris? Because I'll kick into that. I said, is it like somebody from professional wrestling or mixed martial arts? Or I'd pay good money for that.
I don't think it's celebrity boxing or anything like that,
okay.
Although that would probably raise a lot more money if you did that. The thing that just jumps into my head, of course, is the Steve Buscemi gif of "Hello, fellow kids, how do you do?" Other people have said that they're trying to appeal to Pajama Boy, but that's not who these kids are anymore.
No.
These
Jane Goodall.
That's exactly
young men in the mist.
Right? No, these are kids who you stole their high school graduation. You stole their prom when you locked them down. You've blamed them for everything. We talked about this right after the election. They're the problem, especially if they're, white young males. They're toxic. They're masculine. They're the problem everywhere you go. And they got sick of it. And so they're not voting for you. And I don't think a little targeted syntax and whether or not you keep the G on when you use words that end in ing is going to make a huge difference on this. But if the Democrats want to go down this road and waste a ton of money on it, go for it.
Greg, you can't blame them after, the shock that Tim Walz didn't work. We've tried nothing and we're all out of options.
Well, I'll tell you what you got a lot of options at is Fast Growing Trees. It's the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. The Columbus family is a very happy customer with our new snake plant. We've been very happy over the years with our spice plants, the oregano, the parsley, the basil, the big leafy plants like the monstera. It's fantastic. With Fast Growing Trees, you're supporting an American company that partners with American growers.
You don't need to have a yard or a lot of space, and you can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home, on top of the wide variety of houseplants that are available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. And you don't have to drive around to nurseries and big garden centers and make a mess in the back of your car. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants will be delivered to your door in just a few days.
So this spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and then use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. This offer is valid for a limited time. Terms apply. fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. All right, Jim, we've talked about it numerous times. This is an odd-numbered election year, so there's a lot of attention on relatively few races compared to years that are divisible by two. So we watched the Virginia governor's race, which right now is not trending the way we would like. The New Jersey governor's race is the only other governor's race. And then, of course, there are some mayoral races, including in New York City. Now, former New York Republican Lieutenant Governor Betsy McCaughey is writing about this over at Hot Air, reminded us that there are no good options on the Democratic side of the ballot in New York City. Still don't think that's going to result in a Curtis Sliwa victory in November, but nonetheless, right now she's taking a look at Andrew Cuomo versus Zohran Mamdani. And it's still a pretty big Cuomo lead, but it is getting narrower. It's down to about 20 in the latest polls, and they have ranked choice voting there, so you got to get to 50, which in the huge primary, Cuomo is not at. He's in the low 40s. And so she looks at how New York City, which has a sizable Jewish population, has been treated. And she talks about how Zohran Mamdani has gone around trying to sweet talk different Jewish groups, but he's been a big supporter of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. You know, the New York Times calls Mamdani's stance on Jews in Israel nuanced. McCaughey says nonsense. He's a morally bankrupt Jew hater. But she says, meanwhile, Cuomo is betting big on Jewish voters, relying on a track record of supporting Israel and promoting its business ties with New York, as well as his the bill that he signed in 2016 that was against BDS. But she says his outreach appears to be an inch deep. After leaving the governor's office in shame, Cuomo launched the group Never Again Now at the Tony Hampton Synagogue in West Hampton, promising a lecture series and a paid media campaign to combat anti-Jewish hate. Guess what happened next? Nothing. And not even the website has been updated. So, Jim, do you go with the guy who will make you lots of flowery promises and not deliver, or the guy who's trying to make you believe that he doesn't hate you?
Oh, Greg, gun to my head? Shoot me. Shoot me. There is no good option. And one of the observations about Mamdani is one of his first promises was that if elected mayor, he would order the New York Police Department to arrest Netanyahu if he ever set foot in New York City. Now, you may notice that the New York City is home of the United Nations. Every year, the United Nations General Assembly, every head of state is invited. You know, on any given day or any given year, Netanyahu might want to visit. And, you know, I don't believe Mamdani has ever answered any question on what violation of New York City law Netanyahu has ever made. But this is his idea of getting tough on crime, is he promises to arrest the Israeli leader if he ever comes to town. That's really bad. And McCaughey goes through the whole list, a whole bunch of reasons to think that this is not a nuanced position on Jews in Israel. This is a straight up frothing at the mouth, BDS type. Cuomo, it's interesting. One of the few things McCaughey left out. Remember during the pandemic, there were all kinds of ways in which they were cracking down on the Orthodox Jewish communities in New York. Yes. Any gathering was treated as some sort of massive threat. And it was, there's any kind of defense. Look, there was a whole bunch of really bad enforcement of, pandemic gathering laws all across the country. But New York was particularly bad. And there really seemed to be they seemed to have it out for the Jewish community on this. Now, if you want to argue that based on this, Cuomo is slightly better, this is between a 0.1 and a 0.2 on a scale of 1 to 10. I suppose you can make that argument, but that's still really terrible. I am deeply depressed by this, the degree to which, and let me put it out, this comes after the shooting last week. This is not a theoretical threat. This is not a theoretical problem. And what you get from way too many lawmakers, mostly on the Democratic side of the aisle, but I'm sure if you look hard, you probably could find one on the Republican side, is kind of this attitude of, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist, and here I'm going to, justify everything that shooter believed that he was doing. And that is just, utterly infuriating that, there are 8 million people in New York City. How can you not? Could we get Aaron Glenn? How about any of the Knicks? Is there anybody else in New York City who wants to do that? I'll settle for Spike Lee. Not the greatest at a whole bunch of other issues, but I cannot believe after everything we've experienced and everything we exposed about Andrew Cuomo, as I put forth in a corner post I'm going to have up later today, it's like a buffet table of scandal, right? And by the way, ironically, the argument is from the Cuomo campaign is that he is the safer choice and that he will be better mayor than Eric Adams. New York Times today, I'm not making this up. Quote, Mr. Cuomo's campaign is all predicated on what it says is another key difference. Proving to voters that he's a better manager than Mr. Adams has shown he is during his scandal-tarred tenure. See, if you don't want scandals, vote for Andrew Cuomo. Voting for Andrew Cuomo for scandal-free government, that's like voting for Joe Biden for his youth, Donald Trump for his humility, or Tim Walz for his hair. New York City, you'd have better odds with Wilson Fisk if you've been watching the Daredevil series on Disney+.
It's insane because you got Mamdani on top of all this. He was the guy that was screaming at Tom Homan. For some reason, he was down on Capitol Hill screaming about the deportation of illegals. And Jim, I'm pretty sure Andrew Cuomo signed the lousy bail law in New York State. So it's not like these guys haven't both contributed to awfulness. But Cuomo's the one who'll clean up the crime, even though he keeps letting the dangerous ones out. And Mamdani's obviously going to coddle the people that he likes. So
Cuomo is under investigation by the Department of Justice, by the way, for lying to Congress because, he accidentally missed 46% of the deaths in nursing homes during that. And James Comer had argued that wasn't a mistake. You lied to Congress. Wrote to the Department of Justice, Attorney General Pam Bondi. DOJ is investigating. No charges have been filed yet. I don't know if anything will come of this, but it does seem kind of, and this is the good guy? Yeah.
They might put him over the top in New York City, just like it helped Trump clinch the nomination for the Republican presidential nomination in New York City. A DOJ investigation might be the thing that puts you over 50%.
The primary is less than a month away. Yes.
Yeah, it's no matter who wins, we lose, especially if you live in New York City. Thankfully, we don't, but I know a lot of people do, and your life is not going to be any better, that's for sure. Let's talk about ground news. One of the things it does, of course, is kind of let you know which news outlets are left, right, and center, but it's also got this very interesting bias tracker. And so I was just looking at different stories on there this morning, and the overall headline is that NPR is suing Trump over his executive order cutting federal spending for NPR and PBS. And as you look at the headlines, it's, they're very clever sometimes in how they do that and even how they structure the stories. But Ground News cuts right through that. They'll say left-leaning outlets frame the lawsuit against Trump's executive order as a constitutional battle, emphasizing retaliation, an attack, and an existential threat to free speech. In contrast, right-leaning sources highlight Trump's rationale of combating alleged bias in NPR's reporting, often using language like leftist snobs to undermine NPR's credibility, which NPR does a really good job of by themselves. So, Jim, if you want to cut through the bias, realize where the bias is, and figure out what the facts are, Ground News is a good place to go.
With Ground News, you get details about the source of your information, including if the news outlet has a political bent, how reliable their reporting is, and who owns them, empowering you to compare how different news sources from around the world cover the same story.
So visit groundnews.com/martini today to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan and get access to all of their news analysis features. That's groundnews.com/martini for 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan for a limited time only. All right, Jim, we've talked about this quite a bit, especially when it first came out. The Hur report, February 2024, saying that, we're not going to prosecute Joe Biden over his mishandling of classified information. And one of the big reasons we're not going to do that is because his memory is fading badly and the jury would never convict a old man with a bad memory. And so the White House immediately back on that. Biden tried to, and it just made everything worse. But nonetheless, the Democrats circled the wagons. And when the Hur report came before Congress and he was testifying, the Democrats savaged him for, how dare you bring this up? This is just a punitive attack from a Republican operative. Well, we eventually got the transcript about a week later, and it seems like Hur was telling the truth, including that he never asked about when Beau Biden died. Then we finally got the actual audio just a number of days ago, and Hur is even further vindicated. So the question now remains for Democrats, hey, you guys really savaged Robert Hur a lot. Now we know that he was actually telling the truth. Is it time for an apology? And that's what John McCormick, your former colleague at National Review, now he's with the Dispatch, asked a couple of Democrats up on Capitol Hill. He talks about Tina Smith of Minnesota, where he says the 2024 quote was, "It's outrageous the way Hur disrespected and maligned the president. What he said about the president is not remembering the death of his beloved son is just despicable." So given all that we know now, does Smith regret her comments? Quote, "At the time, I had been around the president, and in the times I had been around him, he appeared to be functioning well and was on top of it, so that's what I thought at the time." So does she think Hur deserves an apology? Quote, "That's just the way it rolls," unquote, Smith replied. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine said in February 2024 that Hur was a, quote, "grandstander, not a prosecutor," adding that he expected Biden would be very vigorously engaged when the campaign heated up. Well, that certainly didn't pan out. Quote, "I had one interaction with Joe Biden in the last 18 months, and it was the State of the Union. He was fantastic, and he didn't owe her an apology because he had included information extraneous to his report." So, Jim, the short answer is no. He's not going to get any apologies from the Democrats here. But the Democrats' inability to even admit that they got it wrong, much less issue an apology, shows where we are right now.
So for listeners who are not familiar, Tim Kaine is a senator from Virginia who was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. This has been largely erased from Americans' memories. People do not remember that. So at one point, Tim Kaine, and he talked about how after that experience, he did not want to remain in the spotlight, and he decided just to focus on being a good senator. You and I have some doubts about how well he's done that, but nonetheless. So here's Tim Kaine. Senator, if you interact with you're not, an absolute rookie backbencher. You're not the most prominent senator, but if you interact with the president once in a year and a half, isn't that a clue? And the only time you see him is at the State of the Union. Isn't that a clue to you that maybe this octogenarian is not doing backflips down the hall, as Karine Jean-Pierre was claiming? Am I expecting too much of you to figure out that maybe the president is not full of energy if you never see the guy? Tina Smith's comment was what it reminded me of, Greg, was Harry Reid when being called out of the fact, you said Mitt Romney didn't pay his taxes, and it was a flat out lie. And Harry Reid's response to the interview was, well, it worked, didn't it? The idea being that, well, it's okay to lie about your opponents as long as the public believes it, and that's the ultimate arbiter. So I finished Original Sin, the Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson book, and I just want to make one or two points about Robert Hur. First of all, before he got the special counsel job, nobody knew what his politics were. It was not like anybody knew, oh, this is a Republican and he'll be highly motivated or something like that. He was highly regarded as a diligent lawyer and investigator and somebody who would handle the task thoroughly and completely and, detail oriented. And he got, Merrick Garland calls him up, and he knew he had to pick somebody who was not seen as a partisan hatchet man, but who also wasn't seen as a pushover. And Robert Hur was the guy who met that criteria. Hur goes out to do this, and he's got on the tape Biden talking about, here's the classified stuff, I found it in a box, right? This is in his when he's talking with his ghostwriter for his book, and it's one of those things where you're like, he's got the president on tape admitting to doing the exact same thing that Trump was doing in Mar-a-Lago, right? He's got to acknowledge that there's something there, and he's got to lay out, here's why I'm not bringing charges, even though I have evidence on tape that former Vice President Biden had committed crimes. He lays it all out there. And by the way, when Hur took the job, apparently all of his colleagues said, he did not get told it was going to be investigating Biden. He was just being, you're investigating a very high-level government official for potential crimes. Hur takes the job. And all of his colleagues are like, this is a huge mistake. Don't do it, man. There's no upside to this. Your reputation, you're going to get dragged through the mud. And Hur's like, no, this is an important duty. I need to serve my country. Hur does it, and apparently it took him months to find a job afterwards because Democrats had trashed him as this partisan hatchet man, which we now know, if anything, he was kind of soft pedaling it in his assessment. Because I'm sure not everybody would find Joe Biden as this kindly old man in his interview. Hur did not bring up Joe Biden's death. Biden answers just meandered to all kinds of different topics, which is, not the people who've listened to this podcast, look, I'm not throwing stones. I know sometimes, our conversations will veer off into Die Hard or something like that. It's a different thing where the president of the United States, you're under oath and you're being questioned about potentially committing a crime. And it just was, very similar to what we'd seen in Biden's off-the-cuff remarks. Corn Pop was a bad dude. Just that's the mental state that he was in when he was sitting down to do this, interview of, hey, what were you doing with those classified documents in your personal papers? Where does Robert Hur go to get his reputation back? And I want to kudos to John McCormick. I would point out that McCormick used to be at National Review, went over to the Dispatch. We still like him. Just by asking very basic questions of senators generates a really good news article. Every other reporter on the Capitol Hill beat could be asking these questions, but they don't. Our Audrey Fallerberg does a very good job with this. But it's just one of those things where what's every other reporter on Capitol Hill doing if they're not asking senators questions like this? What do you think of what Trump said? Gee, what do you think a Democratic senator is going to say?
Same reason they didn't challenge the Biden administration. They want access and they want good relationships. And when the tables turn and the hard questions need to be asked, they're reluctant to do it. So good on John. Jim, happy Tuesday. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Tuesday and join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.